Hello and welcome to the Rangers Journal. My name is Billy Rankin. You join me on a very special occasion for me personally because I'm getting to speak to one of my favourite players. I'm joined tonight by a special guest, and I mean a very special guest, and that is Kevin Thomson. So we're going to talk about what it was like to play for Rangers, but more of a kind of behind the scenes, maybe things you wouldn't think about. So join me in a few seconds and we'll have a great time, hopefully. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No, I've really appreciated being on. And as I was saying to you before and in the intro there, I always had a fascination with the backstage at a concert to see what was happening there rather than maybe what was happening on the stage. So this was my idea to talk to an ex-player. So thank you very much for coming on. I may as well get started with the questions right away because I've got, I think, loads and I don't want to keep you on for a few hours. So I'll start at the beginning. You signed for Rangers early 2007, is that right?
That's right, aye.
So see, when you obviously you were playing for Hibs at the time, you were, one of the up and coming players in the country. I was glad that you signed. Looking forward to you signing. I came to your debut. I think it was against Airdrie. You came on for 20 minutes or so. Took my son to that. It was his first ever game, and it was purely down because you were playing, mate. And I just was so excited about how you'd done at Hibs and you were coming to us. But when you're at another team already, what point in the negotiations do you get made aware that another club's looking at you?
Well, it's a hard one really because it's and obviously you know no different, do you? When you sign for Hibs, it's your boyhood club. You've been there, all your pals are there. You've never really played for anyone else, and there's a bit of animosity, and there's sometimes think the transfer actually happened quite quickly. Obviously, the last day of the window, the Tuesday night. I'm sure it was a Tuesday night, and as you mentioned, obviously the game against Airdrie on the Wednesday night. Obviously, I managed to get 20 minutes, but the actual final day happens quite quick. It feels like a bit of a whirlwind, but obviously there was probably the best part of 6 to 8 weeks of kind of speculation and a lot of paper talk and a lot of managers on the phone, kind of agent on the phone and kind of dialogue with the clubs, I suppose. So you're aware of what's going on, and you're also obviously trying to then concentrate on being the best version of yourself every single day to train properly. But I would always argue with anyone that would, and listen, I've played with players that maybe do take their eye off the ball, but I'm not so sure there's certain players that are made that way, that you continue to train properly, you want to play. I was obviously club captain of Hibs, which was a really proud moment for me. But I was aware of the speculation, obviously Celtic, Rangers, West Brom, obviously Tony Mowbray was there. There was a few other teams in England that were obviously interested. So I suppose it's a really good position to be in, but also one that can be, I don't know what the right terminology would be, one that can be quite daunting at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Because you're going to a different club, you're not quite sure how it's going to work out. The kind of figures that are getting mentioned contract wise, it could change your life. Do you know what I mean? All these type of things, like a new teammates traveling from Edinburgh to Glasgow. So there was a lot of thought process, I suppose, for me as an individual. But when it does happen, I suppose that why we're all in it is to try and get to the big clubs and try and play on the biggest stage and try and be the best you can be. So when I look back and I left the club in 2010, and the fact that I can still come on a podcast with you boys and you still appreciate obviously what I was as a player is really humbling.
So in that process, when your agents and managers are talking back and forward, you're not involved in those calls. I'm guessing they'll just come to you and give you the kind of final, right, it's time to go.
Well, listen, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Right, okay.
You'd be surprised who can pick up the phone to you if they're trying to obviously court you and trying to get you to come to their club rather than go to another one. So, and you'd be amazed the managers that pick up the phone to you that play the kind of game that you'd be better here than being there, and vice versa. And it's tough because when you're speaking to Walter Smith, Gordon Strachan, Tony Mowbray, obviously a big figure in my kind of young career, and obviously Walter went from being the national manager to obviously having the prestige in the game that he's got, to obviously back at Rangers, obviously for his that was his second stint.
Yeah.
If
you count the first stint as assistant manager, I suppose you could say third.
But I was obviously his second stint as obviously manager, and obviously the prestige that he carried, just obviously previously being the national manager. So everybody kind of knew who Gordon Strachan and obviously Walter Smith were, and obviously, as I say, a close relationship with Tony. And we had a few Premier League managers on the phone as well down in England. So it was it was a surreal situation to be in, phoning your dad and saying that you just had Walter Smith on the phone or Gordon
Yeah.
Strachan on the phone, and I'm not quite sure that's how it's meant to work, but at the same time, I think it does. I suppose it puts you in a privileged position, but also like one that's like a tricky one, because you're speaking to one manager and you're telling them that you're really kind of like flattered that they're on the phone to you to try and get you to obviously go to their club, and then you've got the next manager on the phone and trying to counter argument their argument to say that you'd be better here and you didn't want to go there, you didn't want to go there. So it's and obviously you're young at the time. I was only 21, 22, so albeit club captain of Hibs and played quite a lot of football, and you could argue quite experienced when it comes to being on the pitch, but being in that position as an individual was probably, I was really inexperienced, and I never had, like, my dad played, etc., and obviously Willie Mackay was our agent, but I wouldn't say I had brilliant people around me for a professional, that I'll always be forever grateful for. But I'm not so sure I had the best people around me to give me the best advice for contracts and obviously going through that type of situation themselves, if you know what I mean. So you were kind of learning on the job as such. But when it does happen and you finally get to where you want to get to, it's that's why we do it, don't we?
Yeah, I didn't really want to touch on other parts of your career outside Rangers because it is a Rangers podcast. But just what you mentioned there about a young captain at Hibs, how does that discussion happen? Did other players get round you and say we want you to be captain, or does the manager just purely come to you one day and say you want to be captain, son?
Aye, the manager really, and I suppose it can be it'll be done for loads of individuals in different formats really. But I just started pre-season. We just kind of finished a session. We had a fitness coach at the time that I spent a lot of time with, obviously, because I'd done my kind of 10, 11 months, obviously, recovering from a knee injury. So I'd built up a good relationship with a guy called Dougie Fowler, who was right. He was kind of boxing, kind of army background, and I quite liked that. I'd done a bit of bag work with him, and we used to go up into the turnstiles and kind of spend afternoons together. So we built up a really good relationship, and he used to call me the Prince of Peebles, because obviously I was a Peebles boy. So we used to call him Old Shoegles, because he was kind of old grey haired guy. He was as strong as an ox, but he would have been a good old age. And he come to me and said, "Listen, I'm trusting you that you didn't say anything, but it'll be a good day for you today." He says, "Even though for you, for the Prince of Peebles, it's a good day for you every day." He says, "But he says today will be a special day for you." And I was like, "Oh, what's that like?" And he was like, "He said, I think you'll appreciate the news that's coming." And obviously Tony then pulled me at training and said to me, "Listen, we just went for a wee wander." He's like, he's just asked how I was feeling, blah blah blah, that type of conversation that we always had. And then he said to me that, "Listen, I'm going to make you the club captain. And what's your thoughts?" And I was blown away, really, to be honest, because I never expected it. I knew the vacancy was kind of up, and there was a lot more experienced players age-wise than kind of that young crop, if you know what I mean. But to have somebody as highly thought as Tony, and obviously in that current group as well, with so many young talented players, it was. Listen, you grow up a kind of boyhood fan of that club, and to one day be named the club captain was a special day for me, really.
Great, mate. And I'm only still on my first set of questions, and I'm still on this thing. But well, you joined Rangers, obviously. You pictured with shaking Walter's hand at the training centre, and you go on to have your first game the next day. So you go into the dressing room. I guess it's a foreign or an away dressing room. Who are the players that come up to you and introduce themselves first?
Just everybody, really.
Everybody.
We obviously I had to go. I think we went into the training centre before we got on the bus. So I went into the training centre to obviously then get on the bus. We had pre-match, and you're obviously sitting and trying to find your, like, where do you sit in the bus? I mean, where do you sit at pre-match? What are the boys eating? Are you eating differently? Do you know what I mean? So like, obviously the build-up and probably the provision you get as a Rangers player compared to other clubs, like staying over in a hotel. We obviously never stayed over in a hotel that night, but to go in, and it might even be in Ibrox that we maybe got food. I don't know where the bus left for specifically, but you would get obviously food, so you would sit round the table with maybe 3 or 4 other players, and the boys were brilliant. I knew a lot of the players, and I'd obviously played against a lot of them. I knew Alan McGregor because I'd kind of go back a long way with Alan. Obviously, I knew Barry as in like kind of playing against them. You kind of know Burkies and Charlie Adams, boys like that, Alan Hotham, who had obviously been in the 21 squad. So the boys are so welcoming, you wouldn't believe. But the harsh reality is you're a new player coming in and trying to steal one of their jerseys, really. So there's also that wee bit of animosity. So it's but the boys couldn't have been having guys like Davy Weir and Big Hugo Eggy, or rest his soul, who'd obviously just signed at pretty much the same time as me. So there was the dynamics of the group was changing. It wasn't just like I was the new boy. I knew Ian Murray, obviously, because he was still at the club at the time. Obviously, I'd been at the Highbees with him. So I felt like it was quite natural transition for me. That I think the hardest part is the expectation changes dramatically, and it hits you like a kind of shovel in the face, really, that you go to somewhere like Airdrie and you're desperate to play. And Walter had obviously said to me, "Listen, you're not playing." And I was like, "I need to play." He's like, "I might need to put you on because all the fans are going to come to want to see you." He says, "But
I
you're not
did,
playing."
I did, mate.
He says, "You'll end up getting bloody injured or something." He says, "If you fly into tackles," he says, "I'll be fuming at you." And obviously, I didn't think I was going to get on because Barry was on the bench that night, and me and Barry warmed up a few times. And I don't know if Barry ended up getting on. I think Barry was just an unused sub. I didn't think he actually come on the pitch. But I remember when I obviously got the nod and he said that you're ready, and I was buzzing, obviously, to get on the pitch and obviously play. And I just remember there being obviously a good crowd. And once you get your first taste of it, I was lucky because we then went in the next game day to train, and it was an international break, and I wasn't in an international squad at the time, and we were off Thursday, Friday. I think we trained on the Friday, but we were then off. On the Thursday, and we trained, and it was a hard session, and we were off the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I remember Walter saying to me, "Some life you sign for a new club, and then you get 4 days off." So the session was really vigorous on the Thursday, and then obviously got a wee bit of time off to kind of settle in and obviously get used to obviously being a Rangers player, really.
I guess I never really considered that you would have known a lot of these players pretty well before you went in the dressing room. So that took the wind out of that question, because I was kind of wanting to see who you made pals with first of all. But if you already had a few pals, it maybe didn't look like that.
I always like wee Nacho Novo. So I used to have the column in the Daily Record, and Keith Jackson was quite friendly with wee Nacho Novo at the time. So when I'd signed, and obviously I used to do the column weekly on I think it might have been I think I'd done it on a Monday, a phone call. And then I think the column used to come out on a Thursday, and obviously I had the big banner at Easter Road, etc. And Jacko had said to me, "I'll get wee Nacho to look after you." But I'm quite a comfortable boy in my own skin, if you know what I mean. So I never felt inadequate or under any sort of. I felt under pressure to perform and show people what I had, because that's the way we live. But I never felt any animosity to kind of going into a new changing room with new people, and you're doing the same job. Do you know what I mean? I was comfortable in my own ability to go in and be a good player in the environment, if you know what I mean. And I have to say, I loved every minute of it, because it was the first time I got to a training centre as a player. Bear in mind, I'd played over 100 games for Hibs. I was a club captain. I'd played in big games. I'd been in cup finals, and now all of a sudden I went through jumping in a minibus or one of the players' cars to get to training somewhere in Edinburgh to walking into a place like the training centre. Do you know what I mean? It was everything you dream of, really. Do you know what I mean? So I was there, and I was, for day one, I was wanting to grab every opportunity I got. So to settle into the changing room, to be a humble, respectful lad is how I lived my life, really. So it was important that I kind of went in there and stuck out my shoulders and showed people like Barry that I wasn't there to make up the numbers.
I mean, for someone like myself, it's me walking into that changing room, not Kevin Thomson, who's played football for different teams since he was a young boy. So yeah, you're probably like me going into another job. It would be a similar feeling, because it is your job. As much as it's Rangers, it's still your profession, isn't it? So you're going in there and meeting folk like you would do in an office, I suppose.
It's just you get used to the dinner ladies. You get used to how things work. I've said it when I've done excuse me. I've said it when I've done podcasts and that before, that you learn quickly. You look around there, you see how other people do things, you see how they train, you see what time they come in the morning, you see when they have their lunch, you see what they do in the gym. Do you know what I mean? You float around and make sure you're kind of looking at the lay of the land, really. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I was, really, and I probably still am now to this day. As I'm a learner, really. I'm a thinker. I kind of look around my surroundings and see what other people are doing, and I want to be that and more. So when you have people, and I always go back to being really lucky when I joined the club, that not just having Walter as the best of the best, but we had Coisty, Durante was there. John Gregg used to walk about the training centre regularly. Sandy Jardine used to be at the training centre, rest his soul, regularly. So, and I do, and it's funny because I hear other people talk about being lucky at times, and I genuinely believe the time I joined the club, I couldn't have been any luckier to have the people to learn off, to surround myself with, to try and rise to their standards if I could. And listen, I might have fell short of quite a lot of them, but I was there and give them all, and I wanted to be as good as them. And I think a lot of people sometimes fail because they get there and they think that's them made it. I was no using Rangers as a stepping stone by any stretch of imagination, but I was 21, 22, and I was ambitious. I wanted to try and be the best player at Rangers. I wanted to be Barry. I wanted to turn up to training and people talk about me when they got in the cars rather than talking about Barry. I always had that drive within me as an individual, really. So I I used to say to the young players when I was in the academy, look around, look what the standards are like. Why do you never see Barry Ferguson getting fined? Why do you never see Barry Ferguson walking about with his phone in the hall? Do you know what I mean? Like, because they're at it every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think you're a learner and you take things in and you learn quickly at a club like Rangers and you can survive, or you're one that you're almost ignorant to what the club represents and the demands and the standards that you need to rise to. And I think if you're willing to be open-minded and get your eyes open and look around you, then it's there for you to take every wee last inch if you can take it. And I think too many underestimate how difficult it is without having the right mentality and the right attitude to kind of strive in an environment like Ibrox.
I'm going to give a kind of note to the folk that I've got loads of people commenting questions that they want me to ask you. I've got enough of my own, but I will try to come back to some of them if I've got time later on. I do want to bring up the Curry has mentioned the point here about, and it's something fans maybe say, a jersey being too heavy for a player or being too big for a player. Is that something players consider when they come to a team like Rangers? Is it too much for some people?
It's like the cliche question, isn't it? But I think it's a good question because it's like whatever terminology you want to play. I just think it's a difficult club to represent because there's so much scrutiny, there's so much pressure. It genuinely is. It takes your breath away when you go and play against Airdrie in a friendly, or you play in a testimonial game that I played in against Clyde one time. I don't know what season that was, maybe the first season or the second season. And Brian Loudrop played in the game at the time for Clyde. There was a few older players that played for the Clyde. I don't know quite what the testimonial was, but you still had to win.
Yeah.
And then you get to Champions League and you play against one of the best Barcelona sides we've seen in the last couple of decades, and you have to win. And you go over to Germany a pre-season camp and you play against Schalke in front of 40,000, and you have to win. I think until you get in there and sample just what it feels like to work under that umbrella, it comes to that. It is a heavy jersey. It's a really difficult environment to try and survive in, and it's not just about talent. It's not just about technical ability. And that's what used to get my skin up a wee bit when the young players were coming through. When you start to like give them the 4 green ticks, the ball, the game, the body, the mind, like these wee things that the academy used to use as kind of terminologies for the young players. You play for Rangers, you need to have it all. You need to have the technical ability, you need to have the mentality, you need to have the drive, you need to have the physical attributes, because everybody wants to beat you and everybody wants to be you. So it's when you go and I played for Dundee and I love my time up at Dens, but when you go and play for Dundee against Kilmarnock, there's no the same prestige that goes as a Dundee player. Like Killierney is quite fired up. The Townsend is fired up, is what it is like going like there to be a Rangers player. So it's probably the one club that you represent that everybody wants to beat you in every single game for opposition as a cup final. It's so unique. And I think that's why a lot of people, as I say, if you're not open-minded and try and quickly learn and look around what's expected of you as a Rangers player, you fail. And I go back to, without waffling too much, my frustration with the academy is that too many get it too easy. It's too easy being a young Rangers player in the academy. It's too easy. And I'm having a rant here because life as a Rangers player is hard, really hard. And I think the environment within the academy should be vigorous. It should be tough. It shouldn't be nasty, but it should be a difficult environment to work in as a young player. And it should set you in a better light than what it would be just coasting through as a young Rangers player when you just win every single week. And I know winning's important, but it should be hard to win, because see, winning at Ibrox on a Saturday, regardless of who you play, or going to every away ground you might go on and win 4 or 5-0, but a good Rangers players never expect to go and win a 4 or 5-0. They expect it to be a tough game. They expect it to be hard. They expect it to be 100 mile per hour. They expect to play against teams that park the bus to be hard to beat, the crowd to be on your back. Listen, I just think that the environment that we should create should be a wee bit, but that's another wee rant.
No, it's okay, mate. It's okay. It leads me on to the training centre kind of experience as well. Training in general, you always hear anytime a player's coming or leaving a club, he's always the first to arrive and last to leave. I mean, what players were actually like that?
I think it all comes through the leadership at the top, really, and then the players, the personalities you get within the changing room. Like, I always speak about the time when I first joined the club. Obviously, the team had went through the Paul Le Guen era. Walter had come back. There was a buzz around the place. He started to sign new players. And it didn't mean me, by the way, but like obviously got Davey in, got Big Hugo in, brought Marcel in. Obviously, Barry had the problems with Paul Le Guen, kind of clean slate under Walter. Captain Kenny Marvel at the forefront of everything that was going to be good going forward. And it was up to us kind of boys to come in and try and raise today's standards, really, that kind of your Durantes, your Cloysters, you're obviously the boss was setting. So I just think that it goes back to that kind of a bit the same as the first question, the recruitment to bringing in the right types. And the right types are having the right personalities to handle it. Not just about the technical ability, not just about that they can take a man on. Can they take a man on when the chips are down and it's 89 minutes gone and the fans have been on your back for 89 minutes and you gave the ball away the last 2 or 3 times? Have you got the personality to, like Boydie, to continue to shoot, continue to get in the 6-yard box, to miss 4 or 5 chances and all of a sudden score the winner? It's like these wee traits are, I think that's where Walter got it massively right, is he signed the right types when you think of getting that personality, that character, the boys with the right mentality to be able to handle the pressures. And I'm not so sure a British thing needs to be the case, but you need to get the right ones that can handle that. And hopefully, I'd like to think I was one that kind of relished in that environment.
Well, talking about training in general, so what does a day look like for you in a normal, day you're going into training? What time do you arrive there, and what happens when you first go through the doors?
So we were, so me and Whitty obviously travel for Edinburgh because we're Edinburgh boys. So I would we just stay opposite kind of sides of the river through here in Edinburgh. So I would drive round to him and either leave my car and jump in his, or vice versa, he'd jump in mine. I'd normally pick him up at like just before 8 o'clock. Or jump in his car just before 8 o'clock. We'd drive, stop at Hart Hill every single morning and get a coffee. Probably about 8:30 or what, and then you'd hit the rush hour kind of traffic. And 9 times out of 10, we would get in the training centre anywhere between kind of 9:15 and 9:30. So it'd take us kind of an hour and 50 minutes, hour and a half. But sometimes you would be on the phone to Cloysters when the M8 was gridlocked, and you'd be panicking, thinking that it was literally take you 2 hours to get to training. And the boys only had to report before 10 o'clock.
Right.
So you get in, you get changed, you get your breakfast. When you first come in, you'd always see Stevie at the front door or Gordy. You'd obviously part around the back. You would 9 times out of 10, you'd have maybe some mail or whatever without sounding big-headed, but you'd maybe get some fan mail or whatever. Or
that's interesting.
You'd have your own wee ducat, and sometimes the letters would be telling you that you're rubbish written off, but the majority were obviously asking you to sign stuff and kind of stuff like that. So you'd maybe sign a few strips, sign a few balls, and obviously, as I say, see Stevie or Gordy obviously on the door, and then you'd donder along to obviously changing room. You see Jimmy, obviously, he'd normally be the first person you'd see, him or Davy Lavery. And then you get changed, you go for breakfast, but 9 times out of 10 there'd probably be a few boys already up at breakfast. There might already be some boys in the gym. And there wasn't
so is this
really
kind of a buffet style breakfast, or do you actually get something made for you to order, like a restaurant?
You could go in and ask for an omelette, or you could ask for poached eggs, or you could have cereals, or whatever. There was kind of anything you wanted, really. There would be probably scrambled egg in a hot plate with maybe some beans or whatever. And you maybe probably need to make your own toast or whatever. But listen, you get treated like a king, really. Do you know what I mean? It's and I would probably say, because I've been since Stephen kind of changed the training centre, it's like eating in a Michelin star restaurant now in there. Do you know what I mean? It's top drawer. And don't get me wrong, it was amazing when I was there, but listen, things change. You fast forward 10, 15 years, it's kitchens change, chefs change, etc., etc., etc. Do you know what I mean? But it was everything you could wish for, really. So I'd have a bit of breakfast at whatever, kind of 20 past, quarter past 9. Then we had to be on the bikes at 10:15. So obviously, because I did have a bad injury, I'd need to go and do my kind of prehab stuff. So I'd do a wee bit of gym. You might be booked in for a massage with Davy Lavery. I quite like the massage after training rather than before. So you'd have your kind of time slots. And then you would sit on the bikes for 10:15 to 10:30. We had him on, who was a fitness coach at the time. Then you'd obviously get off the bikes. The boys would obviously, a big group of us would go in and you go and get your boots, obviously, and then you go out the training pitch. And 9 times out of 10, we'd walk over, obviously, to the far side. You would go straight and add them on. You'd normally do a big lap of the pitch, and then you go into your kind of sports sciencey type stuff, kind of fast feet and kind of activation stuff, if you know what I mean. Because we'd obviously already spun our legs on the bike for 15 minutes, getting faster as we kind of went, you would kind of pretty much be ready to train. And then the training would kind of start, if you know what I mean. And 9 times out of 10, you would be back in the training centre, back in the changing room for 12 o'clock, back at 12 or whatever. And then it was kind of up to you what you done. Pre-season, you'd potentially be doing double sessions, sometimes even more than that, gym sessions. But after you kind of finish training, if there was no kind of meeting with the manager, which was few and far between really with Walter, more so leading up to like maybe a game day, maybe meeting obviously pre-match, maybe at Ibrox or whatever, that Cloysters used to run all the time, just a wee bit of analysis on opposition. But kind of meetings during the week were kind of few and far between, unless we needed a kick up the backside, and the manager would obviously quite kindly give us that. But and then you would potentially get a massage, go in the gym, just do your thing, really. Do you know what I mean? Go out for lunch, have a coffee, muck about. Do you know what I mean? Anything really. So I'd like to tell you it's far kind of fancier, or there's more that us boys do. But once
That
you kind
sounds fancy enough, mate. That's getting
of
massages and breakfast.
well, listen, you get treated really well, and the one thing I would say is the recovery part for a Rangers player was really important, because if you play in a successful Rangers team, hopefully you're playing on a Sunday, and you're potentially playing on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then or maybe you're playing on a Thursday night, like kind of the Manchester kind of trip. So you're
Yep.
kind of training a bit lighter, obviously leading into that game. You're maybe traveling on the Wednesday, or maybe staying over in the hotel on the Wednesday. Then you're playing on the Thursday. You're then obviously back, flying, etc. Then you're recovering. You're then playing again on the Sunday. Likelihood is if you're away for Ibrox, you could be back in a hotel on the Saturday night. So, listen, what a life! You would never change it for anything. It's the best life you could ever wish for. But it's not quite as simple as just turning up and kicking the ball about for an hour and that's it, if you know what I mean. But I would say that the recovery part for our group, for the period I was there, playing Champions League 2 years in the bounce, obviously run to Manchester, a lot of games per season. I think that's well renowned. Davy Weir played 68 games or something. Carlos Queller kind of 69, 70 games Manchester season. So I think the recovery part for us was really important, because also when you've got guys like Walter standing at the side, every single training session that I was involved in when I was a Rangers player was like a cup final, and I'm talking like tackles flying knee high, like a couple wee bickers, a couple wee bit animosity between the boys, all healthy as such. But listen, boys would lay it on the line every day, really. So to say that you only train for an hour and a half, it was blood and thunder. Trust me.
Yep. No, it wasn't really the time I was getting at there, mate. It was more you kind of mentioned a few of the points I was going to bring up, so I'll bring up the first one that came to my mind, and it was more you're playing 2-3 games in a week sometimes. I mean, how are you able to work on tactics and things if you're basically always in recovery?
So under Walter, we never really worked on tactics. There was no real tactical stuff apart from when we got to kind of Old Firm games or Champions League games. And then we would do like a walkthrough. We'd maybe like a Champions League game. Let's say we played on the Tuesday. You would come back. We'd stay in them. We'd train on the Monday. We'd go to the hotel. We'd eat. We'd stay on over the Monday night. We'd come back in for breakfast on the Tuesday morning. We would do a walkthrough. The likelihood the subs would do like a wee box or whatever, a wee rondo, and we'd do a wee bit walkthrough. Then you would go back in. You would get fed again. You get your tights on. You'd go back to Mar Hall. You would go to bed in the afternoon. If you wanted to, obviously some boys might watch a film or whatever, you'd have a couple of hours sleep, then you get up again, you get fed, then you go and get suited and booted, and then you'd obviously go to Ibrox, and it was game day, really, do you know what I mean? And obviously the flip of that is when you're staying away, you might do like a wee walk, kind of wherever in Spain or whatever, if you're playing Barcelona. But it's the tactical part for us under Walter was kind of, we've got the best players domestically. These are the best players. So we never done too much on opposition, really. It was all about us, and that wasn't like that we did. It wasn't like we didn't concentrate on opposition. You knew if you went to Tynecastle, or you knew if you were maybe playing. I'll use an example, like maybe for me, like Coisty maybe saying to me if we were playing against St Johnstone, or Murray Davison was somebody that I would maybe come up against. He was renowned for being really good in the air. He used to arrive in the box quite late, so Coisty would maybe say to me, "Remember Muzz? Do you know what I mean? He's obviously he'll arrive in the box. He's great in the air, so you need to block his runs. Then you let him just be waltzing in the box and." Do you know what I mean? Get a run on somebody, get a run on a centre half. So wee things like that were always like obviously at the forefront of giving you wee tips here or there, if you know. So you could argue that was really tactical, and it was good we kind of golden nuggets just so you were prepared, and it was obviously food for thought for you. But actual tactically, i.e. 4-4-2, we played domestically every week, near enough, with your Boydies and your Kennys. And obviously it was renowned when we played in Europe, we played that extra man in midfield, and it might be a Darsheville used to play like any lone striker. Me, Barry, and Brahim and Danny would play like with extra man in midfield. But obviously Manchester season, Brahim never really played domestically. It was always me and Barry, or Steve maybe come in. And obviously when Pedro obviously come, it was the same. It was kind of me and Pedro or whatever. But obviously the European night, so you maybe go to Celtic Park, you would maybe go that 4-5-1, and you'd be a wee bit more robust, and you would know your jobs. You would know that they'd have whoever, an Aidan McGeady or somebody like that, and you knew that if he was maybe getting the ball in certain areas, you need to double up. You need to make sure you slid over quickly. European games, if you're playing against Messi's and Henri's, I would maybe be asked or tasked to maybe go for one side of the pitch to help Sasha Papic, and maybe have the leg capacity and the running capacity a bit more than Brahim to get over and then help maybe Alan Hutton or Whitty or whatever, obviously against maybe an Henri or something. Or if a Juninho was playing for Lyon, Tomo didn't be making any stupid tackles, any kind of 25 yards for a goal, like just wee things like that. Yeah. But when it come to domestically, I think Walter kind of believed that we were the best players, and it was kind of, without being disrespectful to the opposition, it was about us.
No, it is, and that's to be honest, mate, that's really interesting to hear, because I think maybe the game has changed now, because you hear Clement talking about how he didn't have time this season to work on the training pitch on drills and stuff, but it doesn't sound like that was something you particularly worked on back then.
No, and
No.
listen, the game has changed, it's evolved, but I do think that, and I'll use Michael as an example. I think, and I really like Mick, and I'll never ever criticise him, but sometimes the game can get too complicated.
Mhm.
The one thing that we always had in our mind was, could we blow opposition away in the first 15, 20 minutes? Could we like pepper the goals? Could we be in the right position to have attack after attack after attack? And the Rangers team that I played in almost battered teams into submission with the intensity that we played. By the way, we had the same problems that other Rangers teams had. We had the same problems of getting booed off at half time. We had the flat games. We had the games that I gave the ball away all the time. We had loads of ups and downs. But the one thing I would think that Rangers team that we had domestically, that we went for the jugular for the get go, and I think that was the big message. And it wasn't about, can you pass to here? Can you go from side to side for the 2-10s to come in, or can you hold your position? Like we naturally done that. If Barry hit the box, I hit the edge of the box. Do you know what I mean? If I dropped deep in between the two centre backs, Barry wouldn't be standing next to me. If Barry dropped into like what people call the false fullback, like false fullback didn't even exist when we played. Never even existed. I just done that naturally. So your two centre halves go split, and your right back goes high. I drop into that space to get the ball to either play in there to play Huts, and now all of a sudden people say, "Oh, the false fullback." I was doing that when I was 18, and nobody told me about being like dropping into false fullback. Do you know what I mean?
You just kind of, I mean, you're trusting. I guess what's coming out to me here is like Walter trusted his judgment on signing players, and he trusted those players to go out and play,
Aye.
intelligently.
Walter never ever once said to me, or Coisty, or Kenny McDowell, like, "Oh, you need to play the ball here, or you need to be there, or your positioning's wrong, or this is wrong, or that's wrong." I never heard him say it to one player. Like, he signed the right players that knew their job. Do you know what I mean? And if Alan Hutton went bombing past Steve Davis, the likelihood of Steve Davis wouldn't be in the box. But see if I had slid to the right hand side and I'd say to Davo, "Go on, Davo, you can go. Go on, Davo." Davo would hit the box as well. I mean, but see if Hut's done a big overlap, and I was caught on the left hand side of the pitch because it's been a big switch and I'm not getting there, and Steve gives the ball away, everybody would run back.
Yeah,
I'd sprint across the pitch to try and make sure I get the ball back. The team would shuffle. Do you know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel as though like it's a wee bit overkill having to tell a Rangers player his position.
Yeah, no, well, and I guess that's pretty frustrating as well for you.
Aye, it can be, but listen, I think there's at certain levels, and as you kind of the opposite of that, as you go and play against the Rangers team, and you're Livingston or you're St Johnstone or you're St Mirren, and you have to go to Ibrox, a coach has to have someone up his sleeve. You need to be robust. The distances need to be right. It's a different voice. It's a different tactic when you're the opposition. I get that. It might be a set play. It might be the first set play. It might be for a deep lying free kick. It might be that you try and stay in the game for the first half hour. It might mean that you've got a bit of speed on the bench if you can get to 60 minutes and the fans get on people's back. That's the narrative that everybody has when they go to Ibrox. We were the same when we were at Hibs. But as a Rangers player, the opposition's not coming to Ibrox and you're worried about them. Opposition's coming to Ibrox and you're going to show them how good you are.
Yeah.
I mean, you're putting them at the sword. You're not looking at any midfielder in the country thinking they're better than you. You're fitter than them, you're faster than them, you're stronger than them, you pass the ball quicker than them. It's, to me, football's a game of chess, really. You work it out. Like, some teams would come to Ibrox, like a John Hughes' team. Yogi Hughes, Falkirk, they used to pass it to death. Pass. They'd have 500 passes in the first half. We used to just take the ball from them and score. But the great at it, brilliant, and I would love to have played for John Hughes when he was at Falkirk. But Walter didn't tell us, by the way, they're going to play 300 passes across the pitch. Tom will go and steal it off whoever, Russell Latipe or Lima in the middle of the pitch, or Scott Arfield in the middle of the pitch. Go and steal it off him and pass it to Steve. Steve, by that time, the centre half will be in the wrong position because he's too wide, and Boydie can get in the box if you cross into this area. We just worked it out. If teams only had, I used to use like a Lee Miller as an example because he was really good at it, Lee Miller, when he was in it at Aberdeen. Ryan Stevenson was quite good at it as well because they were quite strong, quite powerful. They were good in the air. And when Carlos Cuellar or Buguera used to go, Davey would always obviously set off. But I used to always deal with the striker. They come into my area, they come short, I would deal with it. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of times Davey wouldn't challenge for the ball at Ibrox because I would go tight with Lee Miller. And Lee Miller used to start in the touchline. They'd try and kick it up. He would come off the touchline. He'd try and flick it on. He'd try and get the team on the pitch. Lee Miller come in the pitch. He bounced into me. I'd stop him running in there. And David would have a free hit. Walter never told me to do that. I just looked and thought Lee Miller's going to come off the sideline. He's brilliant in the air. He's going to jump and get a run on Davy Weir. I'm going to stop him running in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you about. You touched on Walter not telling you stuff there. What there is, I don't know if it's famously, but there is like the talk of Walter saying in the first 10 minutes leave something on a player. Does that happen? Does these conversations happen, or is that just the fans?
I think that's probably a motivational kind of wee edge, we kick up the backside, kind of knowing that. I think Walter knew that if I was at it and I started really fast in a game and I laid a marker on people and I used my physical attributes really, I think it got everybody else around me fired up. Mm-hmm. I think it got the crowd fired up, and I think Walter seen that as a kind of special trait within a game. And listen, I mistimed it at times because I'd done it at Tynecastle and I got sent off obviously after 13 minutes. And if ever I've felt 2 foot tall, that was the day really. But he never ever once criticised me for getting booked early doors, and he used to say to me, normally leading into an Old Firm game, he used to say, "Who's getting it?" I was like, "I don't know." And he'd be like, "Your mate," and I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, I'm warning you, you're not booked after 10 minutes. He says, "You'll be sitting next to me." So and Walter never joked. It was that right. You didn't know if he was being serious or if he was having a bit of banter, and obviously I took everything that if Walter told me to do a handstand before every Old Firm game, I would have done it. Do you know what I mean? So when he said to me that I had to get booked within the first 10 minutes, I was clock watching. I was watching it thinking, when am I going to get my chance? So it was, but I think he knew that if I played with that edge and I managed to time that tackle right and get the crowd going in these big games when that kind of midfield battle is so important, plus there's a lot of nerves and a lot of animosity within the group and myself when these Old Firm games, because there's so much stake on the line really. So I think Walter knew that the way I was as a player would help people around me. It would get everybody else's edge up. It would get everybody else fired up. It would, as I just mentioned, it would get the crowd fired up. So everybody's then on the front foot and everybody's then biting off that bit of energy, if you know what I mean. And these things, I think, when Walter was catalyst at it and he was the man at it, just knowing how to stimulate the right players at the right time to give them the right wee nudge in the right direction to make sure that he knew that if I misplaced a tackle in an Old Firm, which I did at Celtic Park, after 6 or 7 minutes, I got booked for kicking Nakamura, and it was the best yellow card I had, because it then meant I was focused, I was alert, I was alive, I knew I couldn't miss time on another tackle, I was switched on. I have let the team down at times when I've mistimed another one, but I'd done that one specifically knowing that Nakamura was a top player. I was waiting on him going and receiving the ball square to come through the back of him. I've seen it a million times on YouTube. It was a nasty wee one just coming through the back, but he was a good player, and I was going to make sure that he knew that I knew that I was a good player. I knew that he wasn't going to come and tackle me. He wasn't going to use his physical attributes against me. So I knew how good a player he was, and I wanted to make sure that he knew that when he got the ball, I was going to be breathing down his neck. And when I got booked, it actually made me. I giggled at him, and he had a wee look at me, and I thought, "Come on, then."
You just kind of judging his character when you're standing there.
Yeah, it was the same when I'd done it to Robbie. It's like I didn't specifically mean it to be on Robbie Keane. It just so happened. But like when I went trundling towards Robbie Keane every second after the first 2 tackles, I'm telling you, and by the way, an unbelievable player, brilliant career. But I genuinely believe this. When I went near him in that game, when I was coming like thunder, like a Red Bull to a rag, he wasn't interested.
No. The best bit of that tackle for me is you pushing him down to the ground.
Well, I got a bit of stick off the Celtic fans for that, and I probably still do a wee bit. And it was just a tackle, but it was an important tackle.
Well, he is grabbing you. I watched it this morning. He is grabbing you.
What I've done all the time, and you could watch a million tackles that I've made. I never tackle anyone and get up and react to it. I tackle and get straight up. And even the second one that I do, I tackle, get straight up. I'm looking for the next ball. It goes to Whitty, plays to Steve Davis. He turns, he runs away from Scotty. He plays Boydie, and Boydie, I don't know if he hits a shot in the side net or he hits a shot. And the place erupts.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm running the halfway line thinking, my energy level, I felt like I could run all day and all night. Whereas you get that horrible feeling at the start of a game when you need your second wind and your back of your throat gets a bit sticky, your tummy gets a bit tight, and it's a natural thing for us players. You like everybody gets it. You've had a lot of Powerade, a lot of water. You're trying to prepare. The stakes are high. That first, it's like the players kind of doing the wee fast sprint right at the end just before kickoff or whatever. It just doesn't work. There's nothing that replicates when that whistle goes and the blood and thunder happens. And obviously it's renowned that obviously what he said to me afterwards. So that was me. If he hadn't said that to me and hadn't pulled my jersey, I wouldn't have given him a second thought. I would have just went looking for the next tackle. I would have went looking for the ball. I would have played my game. But because he done that, I was like, that was me. I was red mist. Every time he was getting the ball, I was after him.
I want to touch on a bit of a question Paul had asked further up the comments. Is gone now, but I get the gist of it. Players and passion. You come across really passionate, mate. So, but is there other players in the dressing room that are the cool types that need? I guess they don't need the passion to be a skillful player or to be an effective player. And do you trust those guys the same as the Blood and Thunder ones?
I think Barry was fiery, like Giggsy was fiery, but boys like Burkey, boys like Whitty, Nazy was fiery, Steve Davis really quiet. But I am a really quiet lad. I'm like, the way I play was totally different to what I was in the change. I was a quiet lad in the changing room. I wasn't a shouter. I wasn't like one like, come on lads, but when I was on the pitch, I was. And I'd like to think I was a quiet leader, really. Do you know what I mean? I'd done my job. I'd led by example. I trained properly. I trained hard, and I never really, through my whole career, had many tussles with many players. Maybe the odd one, maybe with Mikey Stewart or whatever. But I think he's seen a good 20, 30 fights in my time as a player, and a lot of the times fights happen is because a player reacts to a bad tackle, and 9 times out of 10 that player's reacting to a bad tackle because that player wouldn't do the tackles on a Saturday. It's out of character tackle, so it's a wee bit of a cheat shot. Whereas because I trained like that every day, when I used to fly into tackles, I hardly had anyone get up and obviously you mistime them every now and again. I never had anyone really get up and go, oh, come on in, let's have a go. Do you know what I mean? It was I'd like to think I always trained with respect to my teammates, but every now and again I'll use wee Nacho as an example. Wee Nacho might lose his wee Spanish sheed and have a wee rant and go and try and 2-foot somebody, and if he probably 2-foots the wrong person, maybe a Kenny or whatever, it'd end up in a wee tussle, because even though the wee man's maybe done the odd 2-foot in his career, but he wasn't renowned for being a tackler, he wasn't renowned for doing that, so it was probably a bit out of context, and then you then obviously get maybe a bit of animosity for that player that he's obviously done it to. But I would say that the group that I had or I was involved in at Rangers, and I could go through the lot of them, I would really struggle, apart from the odd foreign player, I would really struggle to find a player that was a poor trainer.
And you didn't grow up a Rangers fan. I'm assuming being from Peebles, mate. But when you come to the club, and I guess I'm more meaning this way when fans talk about we need a Rangers spine, we need a Rangers supporting player in there. Do you think that makes a difference who you grew up supporting, or is it a job as well for you guys?
No, listen, I think when you represent clubs, you always Rangers were a massive part of my life, really. Even though I was only at the club 3.5 years, 4 years as a player, but I also went back to the academy for the best part of 3.5 years as well. And I do a lot of work for the club. I've done a lot of stuff for kind of use guys and obviously different podcasts at the time. And I left the club in 2010, came 14 years on, and you still be asked by use guys to come on and do a bit of podcast and speak about your time and get invited back to do the lounges and still have a really good relationship with the club and the fans is massively humbling for me. It feels like I must have done a good job for the club, which is all you can do. But I never done a particularly good job for Middlesbrough. Listen, I could probably blow the tears off you regarding my side of the story, but it's a brilliant club, and I still look at Michael Carrick and see Middlesbrough and hope that they get to the Premier League and win the Championship. I still look for Dundee's results. I was at Coventry and never had a good time when I was a kid, but I still look at Coventry's results. You know what I mean? I still obviously grew up a Hibby, so I always want to see the Highbies do well. But I think when you get to places and you're really successful at them, and I'd like to think the stint that I was there, it was a successful time for the club. It's hard to get away from what the club represents and what you are as a person, and when it gets ingrained in you, it's such a difficult thing to not want more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let me go on, because I had 2 individual points about games, and one was Old Firm and one was European, and you've talked about it, but I want to know the experience of both. Coming to you're preparing to come to Ibrox. You've said there's maybe a wee bit more tactical detail given to you for Old Firm games, but specifically going on the bus towards Parkhead, is there nerves? Are you still nervous as a player? Because I feel like I don't get excited about holidays anymore. I've been on so many holidays; it's not that big a deal. Whereas when I was 10, I couldn't get to sleep all night. The day before, are you nervous of these games, or are you excited? Are you worried about when you arrive at the stadium, the reaction you're going to get from the Celtic fans?
Nah, because I think the one thing you have to become quite quickly when you're a football player is quite thick-skinned, and I think that the older, the wiser you get, if you've got the right attitude towards it, I think you get you get a 30-year-old that can still be a bit fragile mentally and maybe never got an opportunity to play for Rangers, and I've maybe played with some of the type of players when I've maybe been at Dundee or maybe at Hibs or whatever, and they've maybe not quite got the rhino skin, but maybe you didn't get that rhino skin unless you get an opportunity to play for Rangers or Celtic. And I think when you end up in that environment, you either grow that skin and be able to have the resilience that you need to be successful at the club with the scrutiny and the pressures that come along with it. And there isn't any greater pressure than playing an Old Firm, really, because the stakes are that high. A good Old Firm game can be the making of you. A bad Old Firm game can be the breaking of you.
How are you feeling on the like just
I can't tell
you. Is it
just
butterflies? Is it not butterflies? Is it?
There's animosity, excitement. Listen, I loved the Old Firm games, and I loved the build up. I loved the intensity in training. Everything went up another wee notch, and I just felt the games were made for me. Really, I loved the noise. I loved the kind of that horrible feeling at the back of your throat that you feel like you cannot breathe and you just need to keep on running and running and running and the touch tackle and sometimes you watch the games back and you think, fuck, it doesn't even look that fast, but when you're on the pitch it's like 150 mile per hour. So I just listen, I was lucky to have a good record obviously in them, so I never had many disappointments, which obviously does make it that wee bit nicer. But I just think you know how much it means to people. And I was one of the players, probably a bit like Barry, because I know what Barry was like. You just getting beat was life or death, really. And I know it's no, I get that. It's a game of football, but I think it means so much to people. And I think if you can understand that, and that's the type of player I was willing to kind of lose a leg, really, to make sure I run as hard as my opposition, to make sure I was on the winning team, to make sure that I never let my teammates down, my manager down, the fans down, and you hope and pray that if you give 110%, you'll get to whenever it is 12:30, back at 2:15, and the final whistle goes, and you're on the winning team. Really,
I'm going to take you back to the bus again, mate. Sorry, because I want to know: are you singing? What you doing on the bus?
So simply best obviously always goes on just as you're just kind of coming in, and obviously that was a wee bit of a wake up call for me because I made my debut. Obviously, no, the Airdrie game, the Kilmarnock game was obviously my debut at Rugby Park, and I'm obviously say 5 minutes away from Rugby Park, going for the kind of hotel in the bus, and Jimmy Bell's driving the bus, and then all of a sudden Simply Best starts getting blared, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? But I was never one of the players that had my own music. You get obviously the boys with their kind of earphones and that, but I have to say, like, when that song come on for the first time, I was a bit taken aback. But every time it come on after that, it gave me goosebumps.
Right.
And I was ready. And you get
so
the boys.
You arrive at the stadium, you're pumped up with that noise. I'm talking about the away games here. You see the Celtic fans all lined up to scream abuse at you. When you go in, Celtic Park in particular, how are you treated by the staff in there? Is there animosity because they're Celtic employees and Rangers?
I have to say, like and I don't know if I can only speak from my personal opinion. That the staff at most places, and I wouldn't be able to pick one that's no, but the staff were always brilliant with me at Celtic Park. I don't know if it's because I knew obviously their captain and I maybe knew a couple of other players or whatever. But I have to say, like however much it is life and death, and they're obviously working for one club, and the same for our staff working for us. But I feel as though that's. Some people would like to maybe put a different narrative on it, as if like they wouldn't open the door for you or whatever. But I have to say, the staff within the buildings when you go to Celtic Park, listen, I loved the walk in. I was probably never really one of the players that got it that tight off the Celtic fans. They'd obviously look for a Barry or maybe a wee Nacho Novo or maybe a Kenny Miller or Boydie. Maybe not so much myself, but obviously every player would get booed when you kind of come off the bus. But I couldn't wait to get off the bus and get booed.
Yeah,
it just added fuel to my fire, really.
I mean, I wonder if we what happened in the past 10, 15 years or so that it's maybe different when you arrive at Ibrox now, or at Parkhead, sorry. But again, it's just fans maybe putting their spin on what they think maybe happens when you turn up at the game. Look, I would be remiss not to mention your friendship with Scott Brown. When he got sent off at Ibrox and you're talking to him, do you remember what you said? Were you actually trying to calm him down, or were you trying to wind him up a bit more?
I was trying to calm him down. I'm not. I've always thought win with class, lose with class, be respectful, be humble, and listen. I think everybody knows how I played when it come to walking over that line, and me and Scott included. We would have no relationship really leading into the games. We would try and keep ourselves apart really, but we've still got a brilliant relationship to this day, and that'll never change really. But I think leading up to the games, we weren't naive to think that the game heads were on really, and I was fighting for my corner and he was fighting for his. And when Blood and Thunder was on the pitch, we were both kind of, heads down and getting stuck in really. But I think when he'd done that to laugh, I don't know what I said, but I think I was more, didn't get involved, as in like, didn't make it worse, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I just take a punishment really and kind of get on with it. So I was more trying to be a peacemaker really, rather than and listen, he was going through a difficult time at Celtic at the time, and some people might think, oh well, what does it matter? Good for him or whatever. But when you're friends, you're friends, and he'd been made club captain obviously under Tony Mowbray. I think the fans were on his back a wee bit, so he was going through a tough time. He'd also went through the period with his sister as well, who was obviously close to us as well. I grew up with his family obviously, but we used to share a flat. Heather and Brian, his mum and dad, obviously we used to go for dinner, etc. So listen, somebody that's really close to me, and his family was close to me as well. So I seen what it went through, and I know what it's like when things are maybe not going as well, and all of a sudden you get sent off in such a high magnitude game. The flak's coming your way. So I was more trying to be a neutral in the respect to, like, listen, take your medicine and just get off the pitch really.
I just want to. I watched that back as well, just to see, and you're right at him. But I'm like, are you just being a bit of a sarcastic, twisting the knife thing? But I mean, just wanted to ask because you're so close friends with him. So
I've not got that in my locker, to be honest. If it was somebody else, maybe I would maybe have I'd maybe been a wee bit more involved, if you know what I mean. But listen, it's I'm sure everybody's the same. Listen, there'll be people on this podcast, and I'm sure I'd like to think I've got enough respect within the fans to speak about them in the first place, but to never be derogatory towards the fans. We knowing how much obviously the rivalry is. I would never ever ask anyone to change their opinion on him. Do you know what I mean? When you support the blue side of the city, but he's a good friend of mine, and he always will be. And he's I was never one of the players when it come to kind of the kind of tongue in cheek banter, if you know what I mean. But he liked that. Listen, that was his. He was openly said that his game face, his kind of wind up merchant. That just wasn't me really.
No, I mean, I don't want again. I don't want to be mean to him because he's good pals with my brother-in-law, and he went to the same school as my wife. So, but again, we're not here to talk about it. I just want to talk about that particular tackle. Other side of things was European matches. You go away. Did you experience any kind of fireworks in the middle of the night at hotels and things like that?
I'm just trying to think if we had fireworks. I'm sure we had like a fire alarm one time, but I cannot think of the loving me where. But it's funny because it just goes back to the fuel to the fire. Like I embraced walking out of Celtic Park for the bus, the booze, the hatred, the warming up and getting abuse when you were kind of down the touch lines and the kind of tram lines doing your activation and your warm up, and the abuse you used to get shouted at. To me, it would be better if they were telling you were brilliant. It was like reverse psychology for me. The more abuse they gave us, the more I wanted to win. And it was a wee bit the same. Like I've always been that person that would think opposite. I.e., I would think that if I was to set off a fire alarm for an opposition team, i.e. the fans, I would feel as though it would actually be a catalyst, or it would be for me to motivate me over even more to make sure that I put the fans in their place. So if I was a fan, I probably wouldn't. In hindsight, I think it's all a good idea. Let's wake them up at 2, 3 in the morning. But if I got woke up at 2, 3 in the morning, a lot of people, or I'm speaking for myself really, but I know a lot of players that are in the same boat as me. You never particularly sleep that well when you go to hotels. 9 times out of 10, you're maybe in a room with a teammate. I used to room with Whitty. You're maybe having a game of cards with the boys. You're relaxed. You've probably ate dinner at a later time. You're maybe eating at 8 o'clock rather than I'd maybe eat back home at maybe 5:30. You're then maybe having a coffee with the boys in the foyer or whatever. You're then maybe watching a bit, because you're obviously not playing until the next game night at 7:45. You're probably going to get a sleep in the afternoon, which you wouldn't have if you're back home. So I would say that a lot of the boys probably never slept like babies anyway.
Right.
And if that was to happen to me, and I think it did for an alarm, I just cannot think where a fire alarm somewhere. That would just motivate me even more.
Yeah, I mean the to try to get at here. Was there ever any? And I'm guess maybe could apply to the run to Manchester, because we probably weren't expected to get there. But did Walter ever use like you see some managers will say something, okay, he should put that up in the dressing room wall, that newspaper headline. Was there anything like that he would use to motivate you? Like, that manager said this, can you believe it?
No, he never, but he did. I done. I don't know if you can remember it, but Chick Young asked me a question when Hibs hit top of the league in 2008 or 9, I think it was. Craig Levein was at Dundee United. He was leading into the Dundee United game, and I think we were sitting at second. Dundee United might even been third or fourth. Celtic we were all quite tight, but I think Hibs were sitting top of the league after like maybe 10 or 11 games. And I got a wee bit on my high horse when I got asked, and I meant it in the utmost respect. But Chick Young had put the question to me to say that sitting second in the league, like the standards obviously getting better for Hibs, Hearts, and Dundee United or whatever. And I was like, listen, Chick, I says they'll finish 25 points behind us like they do every other year. Because I was raging, and obviously I'd come from Rangers to Hibs. Hibs were sitting top of the league. I wanted to beat them. And Walter's team talk was, well, no need to give Dundee United any motivation for the night because he's already fucking done it. So
I threw you under the bus a wee bit then.
Aye, so I was all over the paper saying that we'll finish 25 points ahead. And I remember seeing Craig Levein either before the game or after the game saying, "Oh, I finished 25," and I was like, Craig had obviously been at Hearts when I was at Hibs, so there was like always that wee bit. I got on really well with Craig, but always a wee bit of rivalry. And I was like, that was a moment where I thought, oh, and then I'll stick my chest out and say, like, I was comfortable in my skin to say, I think we'll finish 25 points ahead of Dundee United and Hearts and Hibs, and we did. And
you were proved right, so I mean,
aye, and I remember right. You do that every year, but it's not a good look. And I was like, aye, I said, but listen, Dad, I'm big enough and brave enough to deal with it. And we went to Tannadice, and I think we won 3-0 that night. So it's I don't know if we won the league that year. I hope we did, but I can't quite remember what year. But I remember Walter saying that we'll no need to give fucking Craig Levein and Dundee United any motivation because he's fucking already done it for us, i.e. meaning me. So I was like, I felt like that in the team meeting. But then just means that you're under a wee bit more pressure. But nah, Walter was never one that like what he said or what he said or stick this up or stick that up. But as I say, he had the right group, created the right environment. He was the right manager, the best of the best, and he had a group that we didn't need any motivation to win.
Mm-hmm. The cultures at the club at the time when you were there, would you say that's changed at all? And you've been involved with the club, since you've left being a player. But what was the culture like when you were there? If that even makes sense as a question, mate.
Listen, it was an unbelievable culture. Really, I hate the word really, but I just think that the club stands for a certain representation. It's got a certain class. It's got a certain dignity that I believe in. I think that's if you're employed by the club, you've got a certain standard to abide by. Whether that's a youth team player, whether it's the dinner ladies, whether it's the chefs, whether it's your sports science. I think I hold the club in such a high esteem that I think to get the privilege to work for the club, you have to abide by certain standards. And I think when I walked into that building, it was dripping in these standards. Mm-hmm. When I went back in the academy, the club has changed. I don't want to be derogatory and say in a bad way, but it's very commercial now. There's loads of different people that have been involved at board level. Obviously, James has been a CEO. The academy manager's changed in Craig Mulholland. He's obviously down in Nottingham Forest now. They've now not got one. They've had one for obviously a year's time. So like, there's been a lot of change and a lot of difference. Obviously, when Stephen was there, and I'm happy to put my neck on the line to say that I think Stephen's the only manager that I've seen at the club and person that I've been involved at the club that carries the same weight and the same prestige in a different way as what Walter did.
Hmm. No, I think I would agree from the outside. That's what it looked like. Yeah,
and I think when you think, and I know just because he was a world class player doesn't mean that he's going to be a world class manager. But I think when you think like how much profile and Walter's got as an individual and how he's held in the highest regard by everybody, I think the personality that Stephen's got and the career that he had gives him that prestige as an individual. Minus it's different for a manager, if you know what I mean. I'm just trying to, off the tip of my tongue, work it out, but I would say presence-wise and representation of the club, Stephen would be the only person I've seen in the building when I went back in the academy that carried the same weight as what Walter did.
And you're training and playing with players at the academy and other points that it's a similar to him. He is a better player than the players he's maybe working with, or he was a better player than the players he's working with. How do you not put the expectations that you have on yourself onto these other players, or do you put that expectation onto them?
Well, I think it's hard to get away from the frustrations of maybe people not being able to do what you can do. I think that's just a normal thing. But I think that something that I prided myself on was not really trying to speak about yourself and your own achievements in front of people unless you're asked.
Yeah,
It's great to tell the young players what it was like to play at Ibrox. It's great to, but I think if there's a difference way, like kind of talking about yourself and feeling like you're talking about yourself rather than like people asking you about yourself, if you know what I mean. Like, what was it like at this? And then happily, like, I'd speak to anyone about football and give any advice I want. And I felt like I'd like to think I was good at that and no making anyone feel inadequate to you. And then I think being a manager, when I obviously got an opportunity at Kelty, which is a wee bit different for kind of the development part, is dealing with players that have maybe not had the same career as you, but making them feel good about themselves.
yeah,
And I'd like to think that was an individual trait that I've got as a person, really. And I think if Stephen had made everybody feel that he was Stephen Gerrard and he was this world class player and you are all rubbish, I'm not so sure he would be getting the best at them. And I think it's you're probably, if you've had a good career, you're probably lucky if you go on and have a managerial career and end up working with players that are better than you.
yeah,
You know, especially in Scotland for myself. And that's not me saying I was some sort of player, but working at Kelty, working with part-time players, all due respect, I'd had a slightly better career than quite a lot of them. Do you know what I mean? So I was probably working with players that had maybe never got anywhere near the level that I got, but I never, ever once, and to this day, looked at them as if I thought they were rubbish. I loved them all to bits. I treated them all properly. I cared about them. I gave them it all. And I really, really valued them as good players. And by the way, part-time football is a really high standard. The difference between being a top player and being maybe a player that plays for Kelty is the consistency to be able to do it for 8, 9, 10 games in the bounce. These players might do it for 1 or 2 and then have a couple off days. And by the way, there was some that could do it because boys like Callum Hickenbottoms, you know, Michael Tidzers, Bud Joneses, etc. They were top players, Big Jordan Foster. Like, these boys had full-time careers for a long period of time. So I mean, played at a good level, played lots of games in the Premier League. But I think when the standard part-time player that's maybe had a part-time career for the majority of their career, the consistency is probably one of the hardest parts that they struggle with, is being able to replicate that performance level, not just on a Tuesday night in training, but to be able to do it Saturday after Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, day after day after day after day. And then obviously the fitness aspect comes into it. Like, players are so robust and powerful and fast and athletic, really. And I would say a part-time player, sometimes maybe a full-time environment might find them out body-wise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Let me take you back to your time at the club. This is, I guess, a couple of points you could maybe enlighten us on. Did any players are notoriously, at least amongst fans, known to be a bit superstitious? Did anyone in the changing room when you were there, and maybe yourself included, have any pre-match rituals that they would always do?
I never really had any, to be honest, but it's I think you get to the stage where you always do. Like, I was sponsored by Puma, obviously, so if I maybe was on fire and felt like I was playing really well, I'd maybe wear the same boots for a period of time. Obviously, I could almost wear a new pair every game if I wanted to, but if I maybe had a shiter, or maybe disappointed in my own performance, I'd maybe put a new pair of boots on or whatever. But I can't think of anyone having. A lot of boys had the same routine where once the manager named the team, some would go and put their tickets out, some would go and sit in the physio room, no get changed straight away. Other players would be like, the manager wasn't even at the changing room and the ties would be off and the blazer would be off, and some players would maybe sit about in their, and like with no socks on and maybe just their sliders and obviously maybe their slips, but not even maybe having their shorts on and maybe just their t-shirt, as in their warm-up t-shirt. And you maybe get boys walking about with flip-flops on with just their jockeys on and obviously like a t-shirt. Somebody like a Barry was already changed before the manager named the team. He's the only player that was changed, not in his strip obviously, but in his match day kit. Maybe with sliders on, his shorts and his t-shirt maybe. But he was the only player that would, before the boss had named the team. And I think he's probably the only player that would get away with it. I'm not so sure anyone else would have had the balls to get changed before the manager had named the team, really. That didn't then mean that he was in the team. He might have been on the bench, even though Barry wouldn't have been on the bench very often. But he wasn't obviously not going to make the 16 or the 18, whatever it was back in the day. It's obviously not as many players as it was now. But I cannot think anyone specifically having like putting flip-flops. Big Rob Jones, who was at Hibs, remember the big centre-back, the big bald headed? he had like a way where he had his shin pads, his boots, his sliders on a certain sequence, and the boys used to obviously fuck about with it and turn them upside down and hide them and do all that type of stuff. But I can't think that there's that many players. For myself, as I say, my boots, I like to kind of sit with my shorts and t-shirt on, and I always had that. I don't know if you can remember, like if you maybe seen my socks, I used to have like tuba grip, and I'd have a lot of people cut their socks, if you know what I mean. I'd never cut my socks, so I just have my normal.
I don't like
sock.
it, mate. It looks weird.
So I would have my tuba grip. I would tape it at the bottom of my ankle. That would obviously then stop my shin pad sliding. I would then obviously be able to have that down at my ankles, then go and warm up with my ankle socks on, come back in, take my ankle socks off, put my big socks on, my match day socks, and obviously then I could slip my shin pad inside my tuba grip. And I used to just always like having my tuba grip just outside my sock, if that made sense.
Yeah.
My knees, my socks obviously quite high up above my knees, but that was, I'm not saying like a ritual thing, but it was something that probably from when I was at Hibs to Rangers right through to when I kind of retired, kind of back at Hibs, back up at Dundee, I used to cut my tuba grip to a certain length, new stuff, unless there was maybe one club. I'm just trying to think. Nah, I think I got lucky. I think every single club I was at, I got new tuba grip every game. Some people would keep the same tuba grip and maybe get Jimmy to wash it, and it would obviously shrink a wee bit, a bit tighter. But I used to go into Davy Lavery's room, into the physio room, and cut myself. We'd obviously just have roses. You just put it out on the table, and you'd obviously cut it. Sometimes double it up and just cut it obviously halfway. And obviously, I'm not being too particular, but you'd want them obviously to be the same length, so you can obviously match them up, like folding a towel in it. By the way, my wife would tell you that I was rubbish at that, but I used to be able to cut my tuba grip at roughly the same length. So that was probably the only thing that I'd done.
I don't know if you're an NFL fan, but I was listening to an interview with ex-Patriots player Julian Edelman, and he was talking about how people would ask to swap shirts with him, but the the Patriots charged them per shirt. Was that ever anything that happened at Rangers? Did you have to pay for your shirts?
Nah, we never used to have to pay. No, it's when I went to Middlesbrough, my debut. Somebody asked for my strip at Ipswich. I don't know who it was. I'd asked for my strip after the game, so I'd obviously made my debut, gave him my strip, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, somebody else asked for my strip. Actually, it must have been the next game week because I got injured, or maybe it was a wee bit further on. Actually, maybe it was after I come back from injury. I basically gave 2 strips away within, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks. I probably only played 2 games. I think after that, nobody wanted my strip, but I gave a couple of strips away, and I remember the kit man saying to me that, by the way, if you want to give a strip away, do it in the tunnel. I had to pay. I got away with one, but I had to pay about 60, 70 quid as a salary sacrifice or deduction, you call it, to pay for me to give whoever, I can't mind who I gave my strip to, but I gave obviously my strip to someone, and I had to pay. But at Rangers, listen, Jimmy Bell was brilliant for the players. You never wanted for anything. If you wanted strips, if you wanted kind of at the end of the season, if you maybe had a strip that you maybe scored a goal in or whatever, or I still remember my debut. I was desperate for my strip at Rugby Park. I'd obviously come off at half time. I was feeling my hamstring, different training regime, and I wanted to keep playing, but they obviously didn't want me to get injured. And I'd say to the physio, who was Stuart Colley and Davy Henderson at the time, that I was just feeling my hamstring at half time, probably just too excited. And as I say, different training methods, and I never had a tight hamstring in my life. And they were like, listen, just didn't. I think we were 2-0 up at the time. And I think Boyd ended up scoring a hat trick that day. And he was like, just come off. He's like, we'll just look after you. You've done enough, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the game, Jimmy had threw my top, and I was like, what's that for? And he was like, it's your top. He's like, how you don't want it? Like, give me it fucking back. And I was like, I was just scared to ask, obviously. So like stuff like that. It was, if you ever swap strips at Champions League or whatever, you know what I mean? It was.
Well, that's what I wanted to go into. Did you swap strips with anybody notable players?
No, but obviously I'd no long sold strips to give to the community. I sold my strips maybe about a year ago to a Rangers collector guy to give all the grassroots teams that kind of all the mums and dads support our academy. So I donated $5,500 to the schools. But I swapped with Tumashuk, who obviously was a captain in the obviously the Zenit team. But when I was young, I used to play Football Manager a lot. And the kids actually quite like it now, but it's too complicated.
It's too complicated for me now. It's too many.
Takes too long.
Like a real job.
Aye, but I used to play it when I was a kid. probably like kind of teenager to maybe like late teens or whatever. Probably when I was maybe playing a wee bit, I maybe still played it a wee bit, but maybe by the time I got to Rangers, I'd obviously kind of been and gone from me as such. But Kim Kallstrom, who obviously played for Leon, used to be one of the players that you would go and sign. I don't know how old you are, but when the first kind of football managers used to come out, he was one of the players that you could. He was Swedish, obviously. You could get him quite cheap. It's always one that I signed, and me and my mates used to laugh about it because every team you went, whether you went whoever, you'd always sign Kim Kallstrom. And when he played for Lyon, he was probably the only one that I'd said when we played Champions League that I'm desperate to get Kim Kallstrom stripped. So I managed to get obviously his strip.
Right.
So I've got a few, but I got Good Johnson's when we played against Barcelona because I probably specifically come up against him. But I wasn't. I've got Roy Keane's strip when I was at Hibs. Maybe the wrong platform to talk about Roy Keane, but Roy Keane was one of my heroes kind of growing up. I mean, he still is. I love him to bits. I loved him as a player. Obviously, when he was at Man United, I was a kind of Man United lad when I was a kid. Used to love kind of that classy '92.
Did you play against him when he was with Celtic?
So I played against him when he was at Celtic. So I've got Roy Keane's only black strip that he wore, and he gave me a nice mention in his book. So I had been at the 21s with Sean Maloney, and I'd said to Sean, "Listen, we're due to play in a few weeks' time." I never asked for strips ever. I was like, "But Roy Keane's my kind of hero. I would love to obviously get his strip." And he was like, "Listen, he's top man." He's like, "Just ask him, he'll give you it." So when we then played him at the end of the game, I said to Sean, "You didn't mention to Roy if I could get his strip," and he's like, "Listen, go and get him now. He'll give you it." So I kind of chased him down the tunnel, which I've never done before in my whole career. The only time I've actually done it, and I asked to obviously get it. So then he quote me on it. It's the wrong platform for somebody to go and find out, but I'm pretty sure 100% that it's the only black strip that Roy wore for Celtic when he came up the road, and it proudly sits in my games room. So.
Well, look, mate, I've got loads of questions still to go through, but we've been going on for nearly an hour and 15 minutes, mate. So I want to thank you very much for coming on. I do want to ask one last question, and it's again, Curry's asking it. You have a lot of free time, I guess, when you're a football player, if you're training in the morning. What did you like to do in your afternoons?
So I went through a wee spell where obviously I liked a lot of golf and tried to play a lot of golf. We also went through a spell where I was a racehorse owner as well. I always had a boyhood dream of kind of owning racehorses. So I had a few with a couple of the players. One that we've obviously mentioned a couple of times on this, and Whitty was in it, and then kind of a couple of other pals that didn't play football. So I was a racehorse owner, so I like going to the kind of race course and going up to the yard and watching the horses, but kind of predominantly golf. But I'm a country boy now, kind of later. I've always been a country boy, but I'm quite into I do a lot of shooting and I like fishing and all that type of stuff. And my youngest one's right keen into the kind of fishing and that. So albeit I never done loads of that when I played, I done quite a lot of shooting when I played, to be fair, probably more so when I went down to Middlesbrough, because I kind of stayed on a kind of farm, kind of estate type place. So I've done a lot of shooting down there. But so kind of traditional kind of golf really. And as I say, I used to like going to the races, and I liked obviously going up to the yard to kind of watch the horses work out after, because we used to have the horses at Carluke, you see, so we could obviously drive back along the M8 and take the Airdrie turn off, and it was only kind of 15 minutes off that kind of whatever that junction's called, the big roundabout at Airdrie. I mean, Whitty would regularly kind of go after training. We go for an hour or two, get a coffee, and watch the horses kind of work up the kind of yard, and kind of just being in around them really. And obviously different owners would be there and kind of socialising within the kind of stables as such. But apart from really golf, and as I say, being a country boy, not really. I'd like to tell you I had an exciting hobby, but it's I've not really got one.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to stoop so pathetically low to say you'd love it at my house, because I'm in the middle of the countryside, right on the River Erne. There's shooting going on right now outside. I can hear the blast every now and again. So I know what you mean about being in the countryside. It's a different kind of lifestyle, because I've lived in the city centre as well, and I much prefer it out here. But look, again, I'd love if you ever wanted to come on again, mate. I've got loads more questions I could ask you about your time playing, and there was loads of questions in the chat that I never got a chance to ask you, just purely because I had too many myself. So I want to thank you again on behalf of the Rangers Journal for coming on.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having us. Listen,
you want to tell us what you're up to just now and where people can reach out to you?
So I've got the academy. Obviously, it's Kids Academy. We do have obviously older players, but we just run kind of my own academy. I have done since obviously day dot, since I retired. I'm saying it's the only thing I've got. I think that kind of does it a disservice. It's my wee baby, obviously, and I'm proud to have it. But obviously, after leaving Kelty, the opportunities have been kind of no right and wrong timing, and probably never really got me that excited to maybe give up a part of the academy. So I'm actually back at Ibrox tomorrow to do well, I don't even know if I'm doing the comms. I might just be in the studio. I'm at New Edmondson House tomorrow to do some sort of Rangers TV for the game tomorrow. So I kind of, whenever I get invited back, I drop everything and happily go. But just probably waiting for that next opportunity. And I hate to speak about it because you feel as though you're getting a violin out, but you kind of feel as though you're kind of prove that you're no bad at what you do, if you know what I mean. And I've obviously I met James Bisgrove last summer when he got the top job. I've spoke to Craig Robertson since he's kind of come head of football operations. Me and Rob will go back a long way. Went to the same school as me, albeit a couple of years older. So I've kind of reached out to the club a couple of times when different people have been in charge, and I suppose nothing's really come, which is fine because the club, I totally understand the club's got a million people that would love to work for it. But if I could get an opportunity that was right, whether it be at the club or somewhere else, then you're always open to kind of new opportunities and one that can get you excited. But at the moment, it's at that kind of level, that next opportunity is kind of been, feels as though it's kind of dead in the water as such for whatever reason. But it's I'm 40 at the end of the year. I'm a big enough boy to be able to handle a bit of disappointment. So it's I've got a lot of passion. I've got a lot of time. I've got I feel as though I've got a lot of good ideas, and I feel as though I'm good at what I do. But it's you need somebody to give you that opportunity, and I suppose if it is the club, brilliant. I'm always open to that conversation. But if it's no, then you just keep on working hard and keep your head down, and hopefully you'll. My dad's always said to me, "Cream always rises to the top," but I'm not so sure that's the case when it comes to coaching. I think you need to be in the right place at the right time. You need probably the right people in charge at the right time to give you the right opportunities. And football is. And by the way, I would be the same, really, I suppose, in a certain respect. But like, there is, you do need to have a good network in football, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And when you represent the big clubs, that network becomes really small because you didn't get people like Barry Ferguson running the club or people that you've played all your life, and these guys end up like office guys, if you know what I mean. The guys that have not played, you've never really rubbed shoulders with them. They're knowing your network, and now all of a sudden they're picking the kind of staff within the building, if you know what I mean. So I think it's hard for us players to build up that network with let's just say the decision makers, if you know what I mean.
Well, I lost count of how many comments that came up saying that they would love to see you back at the club someday, mate. And I'd like to reiterate that because, I really enjoyed your playing career. I enjoy the way you spoke about the youths as well when you're at the club. So thank you again. I don't know how many thanks I've given you, mate, but thank you for coming on. Love to do it again if you ever get another spare hour or two. But all left for me to say is thank you everyone for your comments. Thank you everyone for watching. And remember, every night is a Rangers Journal night. Good night.